My name is Lynn Ishikawa, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today about a couple of activities that I've used in the past couple of semesters using Google Docs as a whiteboard. I'm sure that many of you use Google Docs in your classes in various ways, and so in that sense, I don't think what I'm going to be talking about is particularly revolutionary, although I do think that Google Docs as a tool is revolutionary, especially for the times we're in now. But these activities stood out to me because I will likely use them in the new form going forward, even when we're back to face-to-face classes. Just to give you a sense of what I'll be talking about today, I'll start with a little bit of context for these particular activities, one of which I use in a writing course and which I think could be used in any course that assigns writing, or almost any course that assigns writing, and one of which I use to initiate discussions about a text. And then after describing the activities and hopefully trying a little bit of the second one, I'll offer just a few things to think about if you want to implement these in your classes. So as I'm sure all of us remember, in March of last year, we were inundated with information about teaching online and designing courses for online learning, which was extremely helpful, also a little bit overwhelming. And I read as much as I could, and certain themes started to stand out, one of which was that we should plan for online learning as opposed to trying to just replicate what we did face-to-face. Or so we were not supposed to translate what we were doing face-to-face into an online environment, but rather try to plan organically for an online learning environment. So I tried to do that as much as I could, thinking about learning goals and planning based on that. But in the end, there were some activities that I really wanted to do. And so I basically did what we were told not to do, and I translated a couple of these activities, some face-to-face activities, into an online version. So in these cases, going from students physically moving around the room and writing on the whiteboard to using Google Docs as a kind of whiteboard. And what I realized was that in many ways, using technology for these activities had certain benefits. And ultimately, I think part of what prompted me to think about this for today, not only the fact that I will be using these going forward, but I think in looking at these activities, my experiences with these activities, I became aware of how they pushed me in some ways to think about how I had tried to rethink how I had tried to control some aspects of my class, especially, for example, through a fairly strict technology policy. So I think I had avoided doing anything online with these activities because I had this idea that if I allowed the technology into the class in certain ways, I would lose control. So I think this helped me to realize that control is a kind of illusion anyway. And, while I like having students moving around the room, and I think, and writing on the board, and I think that activity is good in certain cases, I think there can also be some accessibility issues, some equity issues related to doing that, and it simply takes a lot of time. So these, as you can see, these activities ended up being much faster, and I felt that we could spend more time on what I felt was substantive about the activities. And it allowed for more flexibility and ultimately more, student participation. So the first activity basically encourages students to confront kind of the disconnect between, in most cases, between the content of what they are writing, what they're trying to say in a body paragraph, the point that they're trying to make in a body paragraph, and the topic sentence that they've actually written in that in their essay. So in most cases, essentially the lack of a topic sentence. And my goal really is to show them how using topic sentences can help them to introduce their point much more effectively. So as you can see, in the face-to-face version, students were asked to summarize the point they were trying to make in their first body paragraph and write that summary on the whiteboard. So students were up moving around and writing on the whiteboard. And then in some cases, I would have them tell me the main point and I would act as a scribe, depending on how easy it was to move around the room. And then after that, I would have students write their actual topic sentence from their essay on the board near their summary. And we could look at and compare those two and see how well they matched, essentially. Personally, I have most often done this activity with short response paper assignments. And in terms of timing, I usually do it after students have received feedback from me and they're beginning the process of revision. So to prepare, I create a couple of Google Docs, one of which I share with the students, and that's where we that's what they're using, obviously, as the kind of whiteboard. And then one for myself where I copy and paste all of their topic sentences onto that document, and then I can use that eventually to transfer onto the shared document. So in my class, students have typically done some reading from a style guide, for instance, about topic sentences. So we'll start usually by talking a little bit about reviewing that information and talking a little bit about topic sentences. And then I will ask students to look at their draft and write a one-sentence explanation or summary of the point they're trying to make in their first body paragraph and put that in the shared Google Doc without simply copying what they've already written. And once everyone has finished that, I copy and paste the topic sentence from their paper onto that shared Google Doc. So we can see everything. We can compare them very easily. And you can do that one at a time and talk about each one, or you can do, depending on the size of the class, you can put all of the topic sentences in there at the same time. And then we talk about how well each topic sentence introduces the point in the paragraph. And you can see an example of this here. So I've done the activity itself over the years with various assignments. One of them related to Jonathan Safran Foer's 2013, I think, op-ed piece, How Not to Be Alone, from the New York Times. So in this case, the student has summarized the point in their first body paragraph as humans hide behind their phones because they are afraid, because they're afraid of risk. And then the actual topic sentence that they wrote was, in the beginning of his article, Foer writes, technology celebrates connectedness but encourages retreat. And I think one of the ways in which this activity is really exciting is that by being able to look at all the students' points and topic sentences together, you start to see patterns. So in this case, a lot of students are actually beginning with a quote from the article, for instance, rather than beginning with their own point and bringing in a quote to support or illustrate what they're trying to say. And one of the things that I noticed was that, on a board or a couple of boards around the room, it can be a little bit hard to see those patterns because of people's messy handwriting or whatever. But in this case, actually on the document, it's very easy to start to see those patterns. And as I say, this kind of thing is something that a lot of students did. So the value of the activity is still there. And in fact, in certain ways is enhanced because we can see very clearly what those patterns are. And it's just much faster and much cleaner this way. So the second activity involves students sharing quotes from an assigned reading, although you could, I suppose, do this as a kind of impromptu activity in class as well. And I'm sure the phrase community whiteboard is used in a lot of different contexts, but I learned about this particular activity from Sarah Gramley and Ann Kirkian at Brown University. And basically, in the in-person version, students write their quotes by hand on the whiteboard, and all the students move around the room to read the quotes, and then we talk about the quotes. So I'd like to try this just to give you an idea of what it's like. Obviously, we won't spend a lot of time on it, and I'll just give you a little taste, but hopefully that will help you start to get the idea. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I will put a link to a Google Doc in the chat. And hopefully you have access to that. And then I will also share a link to an article, and I'll go ahead and share the link to the Jonathan Safran for How Not to Be Alone piece, because since I talked about that before. So if you have trouble accessing that, please let me know. But I can see people on the document. I've written some instructions here at the top and so you could write whatever instructions you wanted, but essentially what I'd like you to do is just get started reading the article, and as you're reading, find a quote that resonates with you and write that quote along with your name on the document. So we'll take a few minutes so that everyone has a chance to do that. Okay, so we have a few quotes on the document. What I would typically do is give everyone a chance to get their quote in there. I've also, in many cases, put students' names on the documents just to ensure participation of everyone. So now I'd just like you to take a moment and read the quotes that are there. And in class, I would probably ask students to read the quotes out loud, either after they've added them or once we're sharing why we selected those particular quotes. But would anyone, I'm going to share my screen again so that we can look at these together. Okay, so would anyone like to, and sharing your screen so that you're all looking at the whiteboard together is also helpful, because that helps to, looking at the document together, that helps to replicate this whiteboard, the sense of a whiteboard. So would anyone like to share why they chose the quote they did and how it resonates with them? I can't see everyone when I'm sharing. I can't see everyone easily. So if you're willing to share, please go ahead and unmute.
So I found the observation that you don't actually get to hear both sides of a telephone conversation actually important. That's why I picked the, is it possible no one was there? That just struck me as an interesting metaphor for you don't know what's going on in someone else's head.
Thank you. So normally, thanks, Joe, for sharing. And normally, of course, I would, depending on the size of the class, encourage everyone to share what it was about the particular quote that they that resonated with them. And I think that depending on the size of your class, I think that's important because this is a way, for students to get into the reading and to focus on the text, and also a way for everyone to join in. So let me go back to my slides very briefly, and I'll just share a couple of things, considerations for your class. One, of course, is class size, as I've already mentioned. I use both activities as a way to get everyone involved, but that may be impossible for some classes. So you might need to adjust, but selecting a few pre-selected passages or paragraphs that you want to focus on can be a way to do that. And alternatively, you could actually do the whole activity up to the point where you've created the document, and then ask all the students to write a Moodle post or fill out a Google form or something reflecting on what they noticed about their own topic sentence compared to the point that they're trying to make. And of course, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a certain amount of vulnerability inherent in activity 1 in particular, because students' writing is there, displayed in some cases. And so it depends on the sense of community that you have in your class and how comfortable students feel, and perhaps how much workshopping you've done in your class. But I've had very good luck with these as a way to get everyone involved, and as a way into these discussions of writing and reading. So I will go ahead and stop there. But if anyone has any questions, I think based on yesterday, I think we're waiting until the end to share.